All right, welcome everyone to another edition of our Subseasonal Forecast Contest. My name is David Margolin. Today is November 18th, and we're going to discuss the recent verifications along with the forecasts that were made as of yesterday's mark date, November 17th. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to Philip, who's going to kind of get us going here and I think talk a little bit about the recent performance and whatever else is on his mind. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing. All right, Phil, whenever you're ready.
All right, can everyone see this?
Yes,
sir.
All right, so this is November 11th through 15th. This is our most recent verification period. As you can see, it was very warm here in the southeast, stretching all the way into the East Coast. But we do have some very cool anomalies in the northern plains and the northwestern part of the Midwest, stretching all the way into the Intermountain region and basically the entire West Coast. So quite a contrast for this period, where if you're in the East, you probably thought this was a very warm week, but for those who are the rest of the US, they would have thought this was a pretty cold week. So if we take a look at our verifications here, if we sort by mean, we see that the warmest forecast was ECMWF and some of the persistence metrics coming in at 76 HDDs. The coolest, I believe, was the 5-year moving average here at 101 HDDs, and we see that normal for this time was about 88.9. Taking a look, it seems just about everyone did pretty well. We have our best forecaster for this period, Anthony, at 78 HDDs. Our best non-industry forecast, I believe, is Michael here at 82.8. And if we're curious, we can take a look at the map and see how that compares. All right, this does not look bad at all. If we do a quick comparison, looks like Michael was a little warmer than, a little warm in, say, the Intermountain region, but warm east, warm south, cold Midwest. If we just sort of eyeball it, looks pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was expecting more warmth in the southern tiers, like the southern half of California, Arizona, New Mexico area. That's why I had only neutral in those two areas.
And I guess if we take a look at the ECNWF, which looks like it actually went a little too warm and as a result had a negative CRPS. If we look at their 2-meter temperature map, it looks like, all right, I think we can see what went wrong with the ECMWF. The western part of the US was pretty warm and the southern part of the US was closer to average, which is not what we see here. And just to see, just to compare, if we look at the CFS looks like it's suffering from a similar problem where it's got a very warm Midwest and Plains region and a slightly warm mid-Atlantic area and no strong warm signal here in the south or in the east. So I guess one other thing we can compare is if we take a look at the 500 millibar heights. Let's see, where do you find the 5? Is it here also?
Yeah, you could change that the regions to Northern Hemisphere, if that's
North America?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
Exactly. And then there should, yep, there you go.
500 millibar departures. Let's build a map and take a look. Okay, so it looks like we have a lot lower heights in terms of anomalies here in the northern part of the US stretching into Western Canada. And we also have lower heights in Greenland. Now let's compare it to what the EC does. And well, they do get the higher heights that we have in the eastern US. That seems to match up, but it looks like the EC trough was not strong enough, or it was too confined to the polar regions. And if we just take a quick look at the CFS to compare Northern Hemisphere map, looks like the CFS had a similar problem where it had a ridge in Western Canada, and the trough is too far into the polar regions, where there's only a troughing in Greenland, which is different from what we see here.
The ridge also looks way off on the CFS too.
Yes, the ridge is not in the right place.
Yeah, I don't think the ECMWF Center is going to use this as a case study for, medium range performance.
So all in all, I think overall everyone did fairly well in terms of being directionally correct, with a handful of forecasts maybe on the colder end, but mostly it seems everyone was in the warmer end of the forecast. Any other comments to make for the verification?
Well, it definitely begs the question, and I put you on the spot, put us all on the spot, but maybe we could dive in a little bit into the why, right? I mean, those are some big hemispheric errors that we talked about across Western North America. Just missed. If you go back to that Dynacast, please, for a sec. Yeah, the extent of that massive trough in Western North America. Yeah, from the pole down to Northern Rockies and the associated cold at the surface. And then the ridge out there across the East Pacific, or the near south of the Aleutians. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, maybe we can look at. I don't know if anyone, first of all, has any thoughts. Anyone on the line in terms of the why, but maybe take a look at the, some of the known suspects. Was MJO doing something funny here? Was it just a bad forecast?
I don't know if it has anything really to do with this, but it does have to do with the EC. I've read online that the EC is having a lot of trouble with hurricanes this year, and it's just not seeing them until pretty much they've already formed. So I don't know if that has anything to do with this, but I can't imagine that it's helpful to the model if it is having trouble with the tropics. So maybe just kind of talking as I think here. Um, Maybe it's having trouble seeing like the MJO or other tropical signals, and that's translating into poor model performance.
Isn't this a pretty good positive PNA pattern, this observed height departure, if I'm remembering my PNA properly?
Or is it negative? But yeah.
Or negative? Is it negative?
Yeah, I think it's negative, but yeah.
Let me.
Yeah, you can pull up the.
Which is odd because the PNA is negative right now, but it's not like super negative. I don't think.
Well, this is what the negative PNA would look like for October in terms of, well, I guess this is not an apples to apples comparison since this is service temperature departures, but let's see, this is for positive PNA. So if we use a negative PNA, you'd have warmth in the south, cold in Western Canada. I think if we looked at the temperatures earlier, let me just switch to that again. What is this? Heating degree days. If you eyeball it, it doesn't look too bad.
Yeah, but there's still the question of why didn't it forecast it?
So I guess can I look and see? I don't know if we can have the diagnostics to see what did the EC think the PNA was going to do versus.
Oh yeah,
it is like the key teleconnection that's driving the disagreement. Is really my question.
and you can access that from our at least the GFS version, Philip, if you go to our forecast page, the weather snapshot or whatever we call it.
Let's see, where is this?
Under, go all the way to the top navigation. It's under tools, I think.
Okay.
Weather snapshot. Yeah. Ooh.
Looking at it right now, it looks to me like most of the forecast wasn't
it's over to the right.
too bad.
All right. Let's see. This is a PNA. Okay. Let me see.
Yeah.
The PNA currently, as you can see, is negative, approaching neutral. Most recent period was somewhat negative. If we look about 15 at the 14-day forecast, looks like at least the GFS was expecting on average negative conditions. And at least we have a positive correlation, so that's always better than the negative correlation.
Look at, I mean, this is interesting. I mean, look at those 14-day forecasts starting from about mid-October. The verification, yeah, right, like October 16th, the black line, October 16th. Yeah, yeah. Now look at the errors there coming in much more negative, right? So, kind of trough ridge all the way through with one minor blip, I guess, where it did okay, right? All the way up through just a few days ago. It was just really misdiagnosing, underestimating the negative PNA. It's interesting.
Hey, Dave Margolin.
Hey,
Dark Angelo here.
howdy.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, please.
So just been curious to listen, and I've only kind of caught part of this so far. Just this interesting question about the PNA. We typically think of it as, we look at it as in isolation, but it really is it's an indice that is likely being forced by other things, right? It doesn't just have a mind of its own, deciding to go positive or negative. So I kind of would like to maybe take a little bit more of a macro view from it, and the macro view that was maybe at play here in this window is that there was actually two fairly significant typhoons that moved west across the Philippines, and then in South China Sea that were like straight west movers, and it's happening in its obviously backdrop state, or base state La Nina, we call it. So, this pattern to me looks a little bit much more like we would expect in this kind of like La Nina. And I've mentioned this in the past few weeks, that we're kind of in that muddy window of October, November, where kind of mid-latitude, ENSO-y type things aren't really impacting the weather as much as the tropics are still playing a role. And in the Atlantic, I think we're still dealing with, I don't know what had formed yet. There's so many in the Caribbean that is kind of running together now. Some Greek letter. I think Iota hadn't quite, or was only starting to form as a significant player. And then we were still dealing with the vestiges of I think that was Eta that had moved up over the west coast of Florida. So we had typhoons and this kind of deep trophiness, like base state trophiness in the Southwest Atlantic, Western Caribbean. To me, the PNA seems like it's being forced by the interplay between those two things, with maybe an assist from some base state La Nina kind of stuff. Just a thought.
Yeah, I think that's it's very reasonable. And look, even it's interesting, Philip, on your screen there. Even the day 7 forecast, we usually don't see errors like that. But I think this maybe goes to some of the things Dave was talking about. Yeah, like even above it. Look at October 16th, 17th on the day 7. So like the second. Yeah, exactly. Look at those errors. You're making a 7-day forecast. At this point, you usually don't kind of expect that, but I suspect maybe that's linked to some of the things Dave was talking about, like, one of the typhoons or hurricanes that, maybe did a little bit of a course correction, kind of changed course, or, the models just resolved it better or something like that. But the impact on the PNA was pretty significant for a relatively short-term forecast.
Yeah, usually I'll just mention, usually the PNA is the most reliable of the 3 teleconnections you would use here from the GFS. Yeah. So it's kind of surprising to.
Yeah. I mean, look at the correlation at that period. It's 0.83. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty high. I mean, the correlation on day 14 is pretty terrible, 0.1. So you kind of expect terrible. But yeah, day 7, I'm sure if you're in Dave's seat, that can kind of catch you by surprise. Those are hard to predict. I don't know, any other, it's hard, right? It's, some of these things to really dig in, you need time, I know, to look back and try to really square away like you'd almost want to, even on that day 7 event, right? It'd be really interesting if we had the model runs from that day to look at the forecast and then the verification, and then also to look at what Dave was talking about to maybe identify the typhoons or whatnot that were active. Actually, you could, Philip, if you want, real quick, you pull up, like we look at the MJO OOR kind of graphic, or the outgoing long wave radiation. Yeah, it's on. Yeah, exactly that one. Yeah, velocity, potential, whatever. Yeah, maybe we could take a quick loop through that from the past couple weeks. Sometimes you can pick out. And actually the bottom one might be a little bit more helpful, just because it doesn't cut off the Pacific as much. A lot going on there. 21st, yeah, 22nd. We made this forecast, what, like the 29th or something, 28th, I think, this one.
Yes, one other interesting thing I noticed is looking at my own forecast. I wrote based on the ensemble of models that you can get from the Maxar teleconnections. I mentioned that the PNA is forecast to head toward positive. That didn't happen. And I said that this teleconnection signal is a somewhat cold signal, which, yes, looking at our verification looks wrong. But somewhere I got a trough tendency in the upper Midwest, which I think that ended up being not too far off.
Yeah.
But what that did do is, because of this possibility of cold, I think that pushed my forecast further down, and I put a larger spread here. So even though I was directionally correct, I still got penalized with a slight negative score, it seems.
What did your forecast map look like?
Let's take a look. Okay. Looks like I was too cold in the south and also in the east, and looks like my Midwest was off, but I got the western cold right, it seems.
You got the West, yeah. Hey, can we see? This is kind of fun, actually. Can we see what I put? I don't remember. Actually, oh Jesus,
Very warm everywhere.
I was right everywhere except nowhere. No. I guess
Yeah, the East Coast was right.
The East Coast. My East Coast bias. There you go. Oh, I did not do well in the West.
Yeah, odds are pretty good. You
So much for the blowtorch. Yeah.
I mean, numerically speaking, you weren't too far off.
Well, this is a great example why we're doing the pattern configuration, right? Right. If you didn't see my pattern configuration, you'd be like, oh, Dave had a good handle on things. Well, it was more like, just the numbers kind of worked out that way. But from a regional perspective, I did not have a good handle on things, for sure.
Can you check Dr. Roundy's? I want to see. I think he had the highest score, one of the highest scores. CRPS what? Oh.
Wow. Just
He
straight up
Guess he was a little rushed for that one.
painting the map red, I see.
I guess, just back to the typhoon stuff too. It'd be really interesting. And maybe Dave could chime in on this too more, but so 16 to 20 days, 16 to 20 days out. There might have been. I'm just kind of thinking out loud. There probably was some indication, right? Of actually, if you want to even go back to that, but like October when we were making the forecast, things were pretty active. Whatever. Let's just say they were. Things were pretty active. So then, how do you adjust your forecast, right? We always talk about this. Is it just a risk thing? Where you would try to open up your distribution, you open up your distribution, or a lot of times when we talk about like typhoons, the rule of thumb is, recurving typhoon, you actually get the ridge in the west and trough in the east, right? You get, sort of a Rossby wave action. But of course, this did not behave like that. And I don't remember which ones were recurving versus not recurving and stuff like that. But I guess that's another exercise, not an easy one, or it takes some time, but, was there, a type of, I mean, was there a type of direction that the typhoons, but beyond just saying low confidence, beyond just opening the spread, was there some indication based on the movements of those typhoons that it was more likely to produce a trough in the west versus a ridge in the west? Anyone have any thoughts on that? I don't know if anyone's talking.
Sorry, Dave, I had you on mute.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I'm half in and half out on this one
Sure,
today.
sure.
I didn't do a forecast map for this period. I think I overlooked it. And I did try to widen out my spread. I think it was really, really wide, recognizing some of the uncertainty.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously crushed for it in my verification, which is fine. But that spread is indicative of probably some of the recognition that, I don't think I really added any comments. Yeah, I normally don't. I like to leave it a secret. No, just sometimes I'm pretty rushed. But my spread was wide, I believe, and I'm thinking back, probably because of the uncertainty with Westpac typhoons and Ada, which was I think in our forecast window, and then the expectation that the Western Caribbean might spin up another storm, and here it spun up a Cat 5. I mean, we try to play it in the industry by talking about more of the uncertainty rather than getting fixated on an absolute number. And I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago, which is that we're always underestimating the tails of the distribution. This is a forecast to me that was, again, another one of those right answer, wrong reason potentials. Because when you look at the verification and you shift the line of say 0, the difference between above and below normal, if you shift that just a few hundred miles, you can run the risk of really blowing out this verification either to the very warm or very cold side. It looks like it's gonna be that kind of thing. Looks like it could be a bugaboo here for a balance of winter. But we've had I think the last two out of the 3 or 3 out of the last 4 verifications have had some of that kind of, if you just move this one day either side of that window or you shift the 0 line, you're going to end up with really different numbers. Such as the life of weather forecasts and verifications.
Yeah. Yeah. But it seems like, I mean, not to belabor this, and we could move on to, this is a really interesting case study. I feel like, 2 major errors are seen hemispherically, in particular North America, right? Like, if I don't know if you want to go back, Philip, but like, there's the pattern configuration, which we've talked about quite a bit. Whether you want to talk about PNA, North America, a lot of areas, Aleutians. There's a number of different errors there, right? It's not one of those, well, it's kind of in the ballpark. And then, but then also in terms of source region, cold, right? Like, and I guess sometimes those can go hand in hand, but I mean, when Philip was showing earlier some of the temperature maps and stuff, there weren't those big indications, I don't think, of like, hey, this massive cold pool and stuff. So it's like, it missed the pattern, but it also missed the fact that there was going to be a tremendous amount of cold air availability in some of these areas too, which is obviously important too. And I thought about it when Dave was talking about, when you have that good cold source region, your errors are magnified, right? Your positional errors are magnified. If if you've got this, whatever -30 anomaly that's in that hits Chicago versus misses Chicago, that's a big difference than if the anomaly is only a few degrees above or below normal. So interesting. Okay, I don't have I don't have anything else on this one. Does anyone else want to share anything in terms of the historical event? This event, I should say. And Philip, if since you're kind of already talking about the past, if you want, we could just take a quick look on how folks are doing so far the seeding season. I don't know. You can go to the one, one of those up top. Just maybe sort it by performance or something. Yeah.
All right, looking at performance, Matt Lanza is currently in the lead, but he only has one forecast. If we're looking at people with multiple forecasts, looks like Michael here has the best score with a count of 3. And it looks like that's followed by Anthony. And we have our friend at MJO Analog, also seems to be performing pretty well so far this winter. And then after that, it looks like most of us are all clustered here above normal. If we look at directionally correct, it looks like, once again, fair number of us are all directionally correct, it seems, including industry with at least 75%, although it is still early in the season. Interestingly enough, normal seems like it's actually, the 10-year normal actually looks like it has not been directionally correct very much, and that may also be related to the fact that the 10-year normal is actually colder than the 30-year normal for the past few forecast periods.
That's interesting. All right. Let's see, Philip. You have to run soon, right?
Yeah.
Okay. If you want, then we'll shift to the forecast, and I can share my screen if you'd like.
All right. Sure.
Thanks for taking us through that, Philip. That was good.
No problem. I guess, yeah, I think I have to drop, so I'll see y'all next time then.
All right. Thanks,
See ya.
Philip. All right. So it's always more fun, right? It's like football. It's easier to diagnose last week's loss than it is to predict next week's victor. But all right, we have to try, right? All right. So this is our forecasts. These are the forecasts. This is the forecast board. So let's just see what we've got here in our next 15 minutes or so, and kind of get through this. So the warm or the coldest, we're in HDDs, right? So coldest forecast are some of these moving averages, which I guess I guess the last we had some chilly moving averages here. 127. Coldest human forecast looks like that's Philip, who just left. About 119. MJO Analog's also up there. Although none of these forecasts, you can see the normal 30-year normal is 126. So it's all relative, right? Not too many forecasts here are colder than the 30-year. Just those two up top. 10 years 118. So now the 10-year looks like it is dropping a little bit warmer now than the 30-year. And then the warmest forecast looks like we've got some folks. Joshua is around 80. Paul Roundy is around 90. So we've got some warm forecasts here. Let's take a look at. I'm going to open it up for folks to talk, but let's just take a quick look at what our friends here at Maxar were showing. This is yesterday's forecast. So this lines up with our forecasts from Tuesday. So definitely warm, right? What was their number again? Where's Maxar? Industry 103. Okay. Zoom blocks it. I can't see where it is. There it is. Okay, so let's see what they say. Let's see if there's anything of note here. Above normal temperatures, obviously, the pattern is expected to be positive EPO. Okay. Confidence is on the low side of moderate. So I guess that's low to moderate for the lead time, with higher levels being produced by uncertainty from tropical MJO. That said, the models and CPC upper air analogs are in agreement with the warmer themes of the forecast. All right, so low to moderate confidence, I guess, and you can see the regional breakout here. There's the EC and CFS, also pretty darn warm at this point. Okay. I don't know, Michael, would you like to kick us off here and give us a walkthrough of yesterday's forecast?
Sure. Let me just.
If you want the screen, let me know.
Yeah, I can.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing.
Just pull this stuff up. Where's my forecast? Oh, this is the wrong week. This one, that day. Just gotta find myself here. Yeah, this one. And did I look at the EPO? I think I did. Just pull up the max R one anyway. Weather desk in teleconnections. Let's do 0Z. Okay. Share this. Where is it? This one. Okay. Everyone can see the screen, right?
Yes.
Do you want me to do the formal version, or do you want me to just do the informal version?
It's up to you. Your choice today. Whatever you want to do.
I'll go with the informal version. I'm
Yeah.
feeling a little lazy today. All right, so my forecast was 99.4. Increase the spread, and I'll get into that in a second here. So the CPC goes straight into it. Very warm, 70% chance above normal, right in the heart of the Midwest. 60% essentially for all of the Midwest, into even parts of the East, and they're showing above normal in the East as well. I think that's 55% chance, or at least because there's no 55 line, so I'm assuming that's 55. So really warm on the CPC forecast. The teleconnections, which we've talked about not being too accurate recently, seem to be sticking with that positive NAO and positive AO look. So NAO just a couple of, even yesterday, this was a little bit closer to the neutral, so I guess it's, but the verification, as you can see, hasn't been great in the 14 days, starting to dip towards that center line, which would start to bring it closer to neutral to negative. Keep my fingers crossed on that one because I want some snow. But AO, same deal, except it's been more on the positive side. So, but it's the forecast is more negative with the ensembles. So, kind of leaned with both of these. I lean towards the positive end, of them being positive, but I also increased my risk just because these signals they'll be very close to turning negative, which could flip the pattern entirely. So I increased um, my spread by, I think it was 5 HDDs, to account for that risk. Same thing with the PNA. It's been negative, but it looks like it's heading towards positive. Um, the correlation wasn't great in October, last half of October. But it's been pretty decent in November, except for this one period here where it just kind of missed the negative. But looks like it might head back towards positive. Have to keep an eye on that. And then I don't. Did I? I think I did include the EPO as a positive signal, with again a chance to go negative. It showed a little bit more negative ensembles yesterday. Let me see. Well, it seems to have changed that since yesterday, which I guess is unfortunate for my forecast, or maybe not. um, but yeah, so the EPO looks like it wants to be positive now, a little more so than it did yesterday. Got me to my value of 99.4. And again, increased the spread because of the uncertainty with some of the teleconnections and them being fairly close to neutral, making flips easy to come by and having bigger ramifications as to if there's any cold around where it might set up. That's my forecast. Oh, and I guess I should show the forecast map too. Looking kind of similar to my last one. Stuck with the neutral for the West Coast, thinking probably be a little chilly up in the Washington, Oregon area, maybe a little warmer overall and warm in California. Thinking I can't really show it, but I'm thinking probably be cool or cold at least up in the northern half of this region, and the southern half might be a little bit warmer, like Arizona, New Mexico. Might get burned on that again, hard to say. And then the rest of this kind of speaks for itself, expecting general warmth across the eastern half of the country. Now that's it. Any questions, complaints, comments, concerns?
I guess my thought after that whole attribution is just uh you know, if I was a user, what's the risk? Are there still those risks on the table in terms of typhoons and hurricanes and whatnot that could really greatly alter this forecast? What was your standard deviation was that 25? Well, hard to say.
Yeah.
So you're I guess you're close to normal, right? I guess that would be my question. What my main thought and question is just, are we still at risk to see these big changes, the PNAs, whatever, or have things settled down?
Oh, I think I put in the wrong spread. Whoops. Yeah, I think I used the 10 year as a base, so I'm actually I think I usually use the 30 year. Um, but this is just supposed to indicate I made a mistake here. This should actually be 31, equivalent to 30 year. Because I put the 10 year, must have been asleep at the wheel or something. Um, so I don't want to confuse anyone with that. But this is supposed to be. This should be 31 to go with the 30 year, but I instead seems to have based it off the 10 year, so I'm actually less confident in the forecast overall. I just want to make sure that that's clear. As to your question though, Dave, honestly, I don't know. Wasn't I wasn't looking at the typhoons in the Pacific or the Atlantic. I would imagine that finally the Atlantic will start to cool off. Or, I mean, at this point, it's hard to say. It might just keep going through January in the Atlantic, at the rate it's going. But um, I didn't look at the Pacific, and honestly, I'm not too familiar with how that stuff interacts anyway. So even if I had looked, I wouldn't know what to tell you because I'm not too I'm honestly not too familiar with how the recurving typhoons or the non-recurving typhoons influence our weather pattern over here.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't. It's not an easy. I don't think it's an easy question. Like, to say how. Uh, you know, I guess you could either. And right. It's in some of this, right. We just learned it, right. We just talked about five minutes ago, and obviously we made the forecast a day ago, right. So it's tricky. Um, but yeah, I'm just trying to think how I would sort of address that if I were making a forecast today. Um, and some of it I think is right. It's like you just gotta look and see what's out there and stuff. And maybe the answer is, well, it looks like the activity is not as much, and so it's later in the season. Kind of the things you alluded to, and I think that could be an acceptable answer. It could also be that you expect continuity and still expect activity, and so you're keeping a large spread and whatever. The other thought I had, a question slash comment you pulled up, or this is just related to our conversation. You pulled up the NAO earlier, just a minute ago, and I
Yeah.
happened to catch that the 14-day correlation was close to zero point 0.5, and that caught my attention because we were looking at the PNA right just a few minutes before that, and the correlation was so much lower over that same window. Going back to July or
Yeah.
August. That's interesting to me. I I don't know if I would have guessed that the performance difference is that different between the PNA and the NAO, and raises more questions than answers. To be honest with you, it's just. But we know the PNA/North American pattern is obviously relevant to United States temperatures and patterns and stuff like that. And why and obviously, again, I should say obviously that the PNA is more linked to Pacific, Pacific North American. But is that a normal? I don't know the answer. Like, is that a normal situation where the PNA skill is so much lower? Like, if we looked over 5 years, or is it more so just based the last couple months, and maybe related to some of the things that Dave Arcangelo was talking about, the fact that we've had either more typhoon activity or just the typhoon activity has been less predictable, and it's really been throwing a wrench into the PNA pattern, and not influencing the North Atlantic pattern, or forecast anyway, as much. Again, more
I'll
questions than answers. What do you think?
I'll toss to. I mean, this might be a little personal experience here, but um, usually, in at least from what I can recollect, using the teleconnections for I think the better part of a year now, um, usually the most reliable signal you'll get is the one from the PNA, even at 14 days. Oops, not the AAO. um, and the least reliable is usually the AO, and then the one in the middle, of course, is the NAO, and usually not too reliable either. So it's kind of weird to me that the two signals, which are usually the most, or I guess least reliable, not they're usually not terrible, and you can usually kind of sift through some of the noise in the models and kind of get an idea of where it's going to go. But the PNA is usually you don't have to do that. I mean, maybe you have to adjust it up or down a little bit. So instead of minus half, it's -1, or +1, it's +2, or whatever. It's usually not too far off and has the general idea correct. But to this kind of, I don't recall ever seeing an instance where the PNA was the bad one and the AO and NAO were reasonably correct. And if I had to venture a guess, and this isn't really, I don't know how this isn't a great answer, but it might have something to do with the GFS might handle positive signals better than negative signals. Because usually I'll see the error with the AO and the NAO, and I always remember them because it disappoints me so, is when it says the AO or the NAO are going to sync to negative, and the PNA will head towards positive, is where you start to see, usually the PNA will kind of stay where it is, head towards, like lightly positive neutral area. If it says it kind of like this, so this should work out. But if the AO was, saying, "Oh, we're heading to -3," and the NAO was like, "Oh, we're heading to -2," usually that doesn't end up happening. At least from the last, I guess, year and a half range that I've seen it do it. As for any other typhoons, um, looking at this kind of a getaway to look at it, but um, looks like I would imagine this looks like it was a typhoon. No, I don't. It just seems like there's quite a bit of frothiness expected in the Gulf of Alaska. No, this is the Gulf of Alaska. This should be the Bering Sea region, I think. Um, so I don't know if that has what effect that might have, but that seems to be what the Pacific will look like. I'm not sure if these are typhoons or not. It's kind of hard to tell. Some of these might be. This one could be, but I'm not sure. So,
Yeah.
for what that's worth.
Okay. Any other questions or thoughts for Michael? All right. Actually, I'm a little bit short on time today, so I think maybe we can leave it there. This is, I think, a good discussion on recent week's forecast here and some of the some of the questions. Yeah. So thank you for everyone for participating, and we'll do it again next week. All right. Goodbye, everyone.
Um,
Thanks. Bye.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.